So we're here today with Alan Evans as part of the OHBM Oral History series. So thank you very much for coming along, Alan.
My pleasure.
So I'd like to start by asking you about your background and why and how you became interested in neuroimaging.
I'm a defrocked physicist. I started my career path was through physics and biophysics, protein crystallography. And then I moved to Canada in 1979 to work on the physics of PET scanning, which was new at the time. And after 5 years working in industry, I moved to Montreal Neurological Institute in 1984. Right. And I've been there ever since.
And what do you see happening with neuroimaging in Canada now?
I think Canada is booming right now with lots of strong sites on the international scene. I've always thought that Canada hits above its weight in terms of its global impact in Vancouver and Toronto, Montreal, London, Ontario. They've always been leaders in high field MRI.
Yeah.
Quebec City, there's a strong presence all across the country, Calgary. And so that's one thing. I think there's a lot of individual strengths, but perhaps more than that. Canada is excuse the cliche, my colleagues know I use this a lot, but it's large enough to have an impact. It's small enough to be organizable. You can usually get pretty much all the people involved in one particular topic in Canada in a room. Sometimes it's a big room, but you can get them all together. So for instance, we've last year established the Canadian Open Neuroscience Platform, CONP, and that brings together all of the big sites across the country in an open science data sharing model where we're hoping to really build upon the momentum of open science. The other thing that I think is relevant to bring out when it comes to Canada is that a couple of years ago, Canada established a very big funding program called CFREF, Canada First Research Excellence Fund. It's kind of funny because the requirements for the CFREF granting mechanism is you must be world-class today and world-leading tomorrow, which goes completely against the grain of the Canadian psyche to bang their chest and say that they're the best at anything. But that's the rationale. So it demands large-scale visionary projects. McGill got a $100 million grant through that program last year. Colleagues at the University of Montreal got another $100 million grant to look at artificial intelligence. You combine the two, and that's $200 million towards big data and the brain. That's just two. There are other ones in Toronto. There are other ones in Vancouver. So Canada's booming right now.
It's an exciting time, definitely. And what research or other contributions are you most proud of in your career?
That's a tough question. But I guess if I take the long view, when I got started, people would think nothing of spending a few $1 million to get a scanner, whether it's a PET scanner or an MRI scanner. But they would balk at spending more than $5,000–10,000 on some steam-driven computer to analyze the data. And over the course of the last 20–30 years, we now take for granted that you have to spend at least as much on analytics as you do on acquisition. And I like to think that I've been very much involved in the quantification, the introduction of the principles of scientific, mathematical, computational approaches to brain research. Yeah. Because now we all take for granted, and brain mapping is the apotheosis of that idea of binding together information science and neuroscience. Yeah. So I like to think that I was around at the outset of this, and it's been a fantastic journey.
Great. And you played a part in the creation of OHBM. What was that like, and what did you imagine OHBM would become like?
Well, in the 80s, quite a few of us were going to 5 or 6 meetings every year to try and get what we wanted. And those are the big established meetings, the Cerebral Blood Flow and Metabolism meeting, RSNA, the Society of Nuclear Medicine. And we were also going to smaller workshop kind of meetings, and in particular I'm thinking of the series of brain map workshops that were organized by Peter Fox in San Antonio. And a lot of us were going to that meeting and complaining bitterly about having to go to all of these other meetings all the time. And so that's where the idea was mooted in the early 90s. Why don't we just form our own meeting?
Yeah.
And there were about, as I recall, 15 or 20 of us sitting around a table having this discussion. And we were looking for someone to be a sacrificial lamb, some volunteer to start the ball rolling. And Ben Amazoye volunteered that he would host the first HBM meeting in Paris in 1995.
Yeah.
Well, 900 people showed up, and the rest is history. From that point on, we realized that this meeting was serving an unmet need, and it's been that way ever since. It's where a lot of us who are deep rocked physicists, people who come from a variety of different backgrounds, end up, because this is our home. We feel we belong in this organization rather than the radiologists or the nuclear medicine folks or the neurologists.
Right.
The brain map is we're a very nerdy bunch by and large, and I think we belong in this meeting.
Great. And what have you found most rewarding about your involvement with OHBM?
Collegiality.
Yeah.
All the people that I want to meet in the world, scientifically, they're almost all here, every year. And I love the youth of the meeting. The new ideas are coming in all the time from people who maybe not neuroscientists even yet, but they come to become neuroscientists at this meeting. They come from very different backgrounds. So it's a very multidisciplinary environment, very welcoming environment, a very young environment. And I feel that the nature of this meeting is very different from some of the more traditional meetings that I used to go to.
And what memories stand out when you think about your experiences attending OHBM?
Well, there are so many, right? The obvious one that will come out for me is the famous helmet, the Army helmet story. So I'm sure all of the older people in the organization are well aware of this, but maybe for the younger ones, when we started out, there was a discussion about whether or not we should be an organization or a society, and there was a schism, and there were two camps. And it's hard to believe from this vantage point to think that such an abstract discussion could generate such passion, but it did. And a town hall meeting was held in Boston, and they asked me to moderate the meeting. So about 900 people showed up. That's how important this discussion was. And I knew that it was going to be fractious, so I went out to the Army and Navy stores that afternoon and picked up an Army helmet. And I hid it under the podium. And I started the meeting by saying, I know that everybody has got very, very worked up about this discussion, so I've come prepared. Went down and put the helmet on, of course. Everybody burst out laughing, and I think that went some way towards dissipating the tension. Everybody realized, come on, it can't be that important that we get this excited. So we went on from that point for perhaps another 20 years, I guess, before we finally made the decision just the last couple of years to become a society. And now I feel that we've grown up. We are now a fully functional society with all kinds of all year-round programs and training and chapters. And it's been a long time coming. I lost that helmet when I walked away from that session in Boston. That was the end of the story. I left the helmet there. What I didn't know is that David Kennedy, who was the local chair for the meeting, picked it up and took it home. Right. And his wife was pressuring to throw it out for years. Right. And then he brought it to the 20th anniversary meeting in Hamburg and gave it back to me. So it's now got a pride of place on my desk.
Right, fantastic. And what changes have you seen over the years?
an increasing recognition of genetics. I think we're trying to move away from just being imaging, so the incorporation of other kinds of science into our deliberations, so whether it's genetics or now increasingly social determinants of brain health. I think that's where we're going, continually trying to reinvent ourselves and not be hidebound by a particular acquisition methodology.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to study the brain, not trying to study imaging. And I, for instance, I never like to call myself a neuroimager, because I think it gives the message that you're more concerned with just the details of image processing rather than the brain.
Right.
And I like to think that we're interested in the brain first and foremost, with new ways to analyze it. We take for granted connectivity. It's one of the shibboleths of our approach. Not that many people out there, even now, really have got this in the imaging world. They still think of identifying what part of the brain got larger or smaller in a disease, which I think is naive. What we routinely look at is the interaction across different brain regions, across time, across space. We have philosophical issues of what we even mean by connectivity, but I think that considering the brain as a spatial, temporally evolving and changing system that responds to external input and then synthesizes a solution and does that through a networked brain organization, then provides some kind of action based on the perception of the outside world. You heard that from Carl Friston today, last week, in his discussion of Markov blankets, which I frankly admit I'd never heard of the concept before. But the basic idea behind it, which is we're trying to understand the brain and the complexities of the brain using advanced computational analytic perspectives, I think is what continues to define this organization, far beyond what most other brain research organizations do.
Yeah. And last question, what do you see as the future of brain mapping?
I think I a little bit just talked about it in the sense that I think we have to continue to move on from a consideration of just the acquisition devices. We want to incorporate different kinds of information, whether it's genetics or behavioral metrics. We have to have much more sophisticated analytic algorithms to allow us to better understand what's going on in the brain. Modeling is critical. We can't be just reporting phenomenology. We waved our fingers and that part of the brain lit up is meaningless, basically. So I think that we're on the right path. We're appealing to advanced strategies for understanding data in general, so the artificial intelligence movement, particularly deep learning. These kinds of strategies, we're going to bring more and more of that into our field to better understand and capture the essence of the functioning human brain. I don't see, I think we've only scratched the surface of that story. So I think the State of the Union is strong. I mean, we're in good shape. I don't want us to get much bigger. Let me say that. I don't want this meeting to turn into another Society for Neuroscience. 3,000 people is a good size. And I would like it to stay that way. It already has a strong international, global presence, and the appointment of the officers for this year is good to see that it's really reaching out to its global community. That's all good. I'm very happy with the way things are going.
Professor Evans, thank you very much.
My pleasure.